Welcome to episode 69, where we are talking about the other side of fawning when a strong personality becomes pushy. Welcome to Burnout Solutions. My name is Mona Tippett. I am a registered nurse, a life coach, an emotional resiliency expert, and a mom. I love to help healthcare workers and caretakers and just busy, capable people understand their brain and nervous system so stress, overwhelm, and frustration do not run their life. Here on this podcast, we break down burnout, emotional overload, and survival patterns in simple human language. I love to give you practical ways to feel safer, calmer, and more present in your everyday life. You do not need fixing. What you need is support and a nervous system that knows that it's safe. Thanks for being here. Hello, and welcome back to Burnout Solutions. I am so glad that you're here. I hope that you listened to last week's episode about fawning because this is kind of a piggyback to that one. And if you didn't, I'm just going to give a really quick version of what you need to know about fawning. And then we'll get into today's episode, which is the opposite side of the coin of fawning, and that is more of a pushy attitude. So really quick, fawning is a survival response alongside of fight, flight, or freeze. And this is what happens when your nervous system detects a social threat and decides that the fastest route to safety is to be accommodating, is to appease, is to say yes, is to go along with what somebody else wants, even when everything in you would rather not. Even when you're going against your core values, you just agree to create safety. And we talked about what it looks like last time, where it comes from. We talked about why it works, why it can create a pattern, and why it's so persistent. And I want you to remember that it is not a character flaw, but it is a nervous system pattern, a very smart, adaptive one that has served you in the past. That's why your brain offers it. And it has been helpful, but there comes a point where you don't like to do it. And I have found myself fawning in situations and I don't like it. I see it in my children, more specifically my girls than my boys. I see in other people. I help my clients with it. And that's why I've been thinking about it. But today we're going to talk about the part that I don't think gets talked about enough. And that is the other side of the fawning dynamic. That is the other person on the other end, the one who has a stronger personality, a higher tolerance for conflict, and the one who tends to get in those people's way. And I want to warn you in advance that I'm going to be talking about myself because I am often that person in some of my relationships. It has been very uncomfortable recognizing that, but I have thought about that for a long time. And that's why I feel like I am an expert at it. And we're going to talk a little bit about what we can do, all of you strong persons out there, and how I have learned to recognize it and kind of manage part of my personality. So let's just get into it. When we have a fawning dynamic, there is almost always someone on the other side that is, I'm going to say, creating that environment where another person feels like they need to fawn. And this is, again, somebody with a stronger personality, a high tolerance for conflict, somebody who actually creates the conflict, somebody who likes to play the devil's advocate, somebody who potentially has a pattern of wanting to get their way and consistently getting their way in relationships. I believe most of us know a person like this. You might work with them. You might even be related to them. They are, in my last episode, the parent standing across from my client at that after play cast party who was insisting that this other child join the cast party. And again, I'm talking about myself. I feel like I do and have created an environment that people naturally agree because they don't feel like the fight is worth it. And it drives me crazy, actually. And I want to start out with why this has been on my brain. A few weeks ago, I had a conversation with two of my sisters, and all three of us volunteer in a similar role in our individual church congregations. We all live in different areas, same religion, just different congregations. And each of us volunteers to lead the music for the children who are 3 to 11 years old in our own congregations. So this is the same job. We actually teach a lot of the same songs. It is the same basic structure. We work with other adults to manage this second hour of church. And we all have been working at this volunteer position for a few years. And I actually have done this several times. This is actually the 4th time that I've done this. Now, I was noticing some differences as my sisters were talking about how things work in their congregation. In mine, I just run things. I make the decisions about the songs. I talk to the pianist. I decide how we're doing them, in what order, how much time we spend on each one. And I really have like the final say in what songs we're doing and singing. And it's really always been this way in all 4 times that I've had this volunteer position. I do, and I have asked other adults involved, hey, do you want me to check with you about what I'm planning each week? Do you want input? Do you want me to let you know when the piano player is gone or when I'm gone? Or how much input do you want in what I'm actually teaching? And they've all said, no, not at all. We totally trust you completely. Just go for it. You know, we don't need to be the middleman. If there's a problem, let us know. But otherwise, just keep going. Do your thing, and that's great. And that's really been the dynamic every single time I've done this across the 4 different times. Now, when I compared to how things work with my sisters, they each had more collaboration. They had more feedback. They had more people weighing in. They had people saying, you know, I don't really want that song, or I do want this song, or can you please do this? Or I really feel like the kids need to learn this, you know, etc. Like, for example, this year we're learning about the Old Testament. So a lot of our songs go with the stories of the Old Testament. And as they were each telling how things run in their congregation, I just had this kind of uncomfortable thought. Is it possible that people just don't push back with me? Or is it possible that it isn't because I am doing an amazing job? Is it that they don't have any interest? But is it that disagreeing with me feels more trouble than it's worth? Is it possible that because I have such a strong opinion that they just feel like, whatever, just let her do her thing. We don't want to create the conflict. So that's kind of been an uncomfortable question to sit with. And I want to be totally honest that I don't really know the answer. It's probably some of both. It's probably that I've done it. I seem confident. The kids have fun. The kids are learning the songs. Like, I really like it. Maybe they're like, okay, great, let her do her thing. But maybe they actually do have a preference. They just aren't saying so. But here is what I know about people with strong personalities, including myself. We often have no idea that we are creating an environment where other people don't feel safe to push back. We are not trying to be intimidating. We are not trying to make it our way or the highway. We just have strong opinions. We move fast. We make decisions. We assume that if somebody actually had a problem, they'd say so. But I'm also realizing that there are those people, the Fawners in the room, that they've already calculated that saying something isn't worth the risk, and so they just don't. And so we walk away, like in this situation with me at my church, I walk away thinking that everything is totally fine. Otherwise, people would say something. And maybe something isn't right. And people like me just need to slow down, which I am getting better at. I've also thought about this in my marriage. After I went through life coach school and started learning about the brain, started learning about the nervous system in the Forward Facing Institute, I looked back at our early years of our marriage and thought, I'm pretty sure he was walking on eggshells. And maybe he is more of a fawner in some ways. And I was absolutely the fighter. And looking back, I feel like I genuinely had not seen things clearly until then. And so, that was another hard thing to sit with. And I'm going to tell you that our marriage is actually better now. We've been married for 21 years than it ever has been. And I think because, shockingly, there is more give and take. We are both more authentic, and we both have created that space for each other to be more authentic, and we don't get as offended. And really, this is why I love coaching. This is why I love everything that I've learned, is because I personally have seen different results in my life just by changing myself, just by changing my perception. Which is why I love to help people do the same. I promise you, if you're either a fawner or a fighter, you can change. So I do want to talk about a little bit about what I have thought of and how my fighter personality maybe came from. And I think this is important to understand. And it's something that I really only came to see about myself after doing a lot of personal work and learning, that maybe the person with a strong personality, the one who pushes, the one who takes over, the one who gets their way, that they more often than not are also running a nervous system pattern. It just looks different from fawning, but underneath, at the root of it, is the same, and that is fear. Fear is a very strong motivator. And I believe that more often than not, a pushy person isn't totally confident, but they are defending, and there is a difference. So let me tell you what I mean. For some people who develop into that dominant, assertive, I'm going to make this decision right now personality, maybe it came from an environment where being wrong was very costly. Maybe they grew up being hypercriticized. Maybe every single mistake was pointed out. Maybe every wrong answer was something that acknowledged or took away from their worth. And so somewhere along the way, the nervous system developed a strategy. If I am certain, if I decide fast, if I project confidence and I push my position far enough, then I don't have to sit in the vulnerability of being wrong. And so that ego develops, it's strengthened, it creates a pattern, and that helps protect that person in these same situations of social danger from a feeling that feels genuinely dangerous, right? And so they create that look, they create that decisiveness and that confidence that is driven by fear and ego. There's also another version that I think, and this was also part of my story, growing up in an environment where decisions weren't made. There was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of, oh, I don't know, we'll just see. A lot of, we're not going to make that decision. We'll just see where the cards lie and go from there. There were a lot of things that were left unresolved, and that uncertainty felt genuinely unsafe and dangerous. And so a nervous system decided, I am going to be the person who makes the decisions. I will create that certainty for me. I will not leave things unresolved. I will move fast. I will be decisive and know what I want and not waver, because the alternative, which is that open, unresolved, uncertain feeling, is something that I am not willing to sit in. And I've seen this so many times with people who are in charge of an event. They want to hyper manage everything. They want to control everything so that they feel better. And as a result, you end up with a person who looks incredibly confident and capable and decisive. And this isn't to say that they're not, they often are, but maybe underneath it, the engine that's running that decisiveness can sometimes just be the ego trying to avoid the discomfort of uncertainty and fear of being wrong, and fear of not being accepted, and fear of what does being wrong really mean about me. And both fawning and fighting are created from a genuine self-distrust. And I want you to recognize, I hope you can recognize, that the fawner and the fighter are more similar than they look. They are both running a survival strategy. They're both trying to avoid something that feels threatening. The fawner avoids the conflict and the disapproval by agreeing. The fighter avoids uncertainty and vulnerability of being wrong. So we see different strategies here, but the same root, that the nervous system is trying to stay safe. And both of these strategies are fear driven. So I'm going to say, just like the fawner, the fighter didn't choose their pattern. It developed for a reason, and it worked, and it kept running, and it kept getting strengthened, and it just created a personality maybe, or a trait. And this just keeps going and working until you stop and you pause and you question it and say, is this pattern working? Do I want to continue it? Now, I do think something really interesting happens about these two nervous system patterns. Often, I have seen the fawner and the fighter, they tend to find each other in relationships, in friendships, at work. And I don't believe that it's totally random. And to me, it makes perfect nervous system sense. Because what happens? A pushy person gets a partner, a coworker, or a friend who accommodates them perfectly. The conflict stays low, things get decided, the pushy person has their needs met, and the fawner gets somebody whose emotional state they can read and manage and agree, and whose approval, once that is gained, feels like genuine relief. And on the surface, it totally works until it doesn't. And here's what's really important to understand about who wins in this dynamic. The person who consistently gets their way isn't stronger or smarter. And I want you to know that. They just have a higher tolerance for sitting in the discomfort of somebody else being unhappy with them. The fawner's nervous system often hits that limit first, and so they accommodate and they give in every time. And this is not a competition. This is just two different windows of tolerance in the same room. And the one who has the more narrow window of tolerance will fold first, or they will fold in different situations. So I want to ask you right now, where do you land in this? Can you see yourself in the fawner? Can you see yourself in the fighter? Can you see yourself in both, depending on the relationship or the context? Because guess what? Here's the thing. Most of us aren't strictly one or the other. We can vacillate between the two when our window of tolerance is narrow, when our window of tolerance is small. Now, I totally have been a fawner often, and sometimes I still am. When I look back, I was always a fighter at home and a fawner at work, especially early in my nursing career. In my first nursing job, I wasn't confident. I was new. I was uncertain. I didn't trust my own judgment yet. And so I was very good at accommodating. I was very good at managing other people's emotions. I was very good at saying yes when I was overwhelmed. I was very good at stepping in. I was very good at always saying yes. I calibrated other people's moods, especially the doctors. You know, we all knew what attendings were grouchy and how to navigate their moods before we delivered information. And that is classic fawning. But when I was at home, where I felt capable and certain in my element, I was the one who always had the strong opinion. I was the one who moved fast, who made decisions, and didn't always leave room for other people's perspectives. And I saw that, and I still see that sometimes in my husband, in my children. And this is what human beings do, right? We learn to navigate our world and navigate each other through our relationships. We're always learning. Context matters, confidence matters. And I need you to remember that the nervous system is always doing a calculation. How safe is it to be fully myself here? And often the answer changes depending on the room that you're in, depending on the friends that you're with, depending on the history that has been created in those situations, right? And it's just so interesting for me to, as I've been pondering this and thinking about it a lot, to look over my relationships and think, okay, I was fawning there. My husband was fawning here. That wasn't a good time because it totally was my way or the highway. And so now I want to talk about a few things that have helped me in my fighting position. 3 things that I have worked on, I am working on, and these things have genuinely made a difference for me. So the first one that has been huge for me is to realize that there is often not a right or wrong. And I help my clients see this all the time. We get to choose our experience. We get to choose what we want to do in life. And just because 2 people do things differently, that does not mean that they're right or wrong. Every decision does not have a moral quality to it. I helped my clients with this all the time with health coaching and with eating. Food is neither good nor bad. It just creates an experience. It creates a result. If you want to eat something that supports your health goals, you need to eat something that supports your health goals. And there is time, and I encourage that you still have food that you enjoy. I have really worked on my way of living, and the things that I choose to do on my day-to-day basis does not mean that my children need to choose that. I am letting go of that control. And that has been huge. That has been the biggest, that we each get to choose our experience. We have our own agency, and there is rarely right or wrong. And if you make a wrong choice in air quotes, you get to live with those consequences. I don't. And so I have become much better at separating myself from things that my children and other people, my children, coworkers, neighbors, other people do. That's on them. The second one is I am getting better at explicitly inviting disagreement. And when I say explicitly, I mean not just leaving a pause and hoping somebody will fill it, but I actually say the words. I really want to know if you see this differently. I really want to know what you're actually thinking. Please don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Please tell me what you really think. And I've had great experience doing this with specifically my daughters. When I can sense that one of them is starting to just say, okay, I'm sorry, yeah, whatever. I'm like, no. I want to know your actual opinion, and I'm going to do my very best to not push back. And that's where I get to regulate my own nervous system. So please just tell me. And that has been the hardest part, is to stay regulated when they actually do disagree, to not let my face or my body language shut them down in that moment that they are explaining, and to listen and reply in a way that doesn't imply that my way is a better way. That's the beauty about life, right? There are so many people in my close circle that I've had experience after experience after experience with this. So it's perfect. And that is why I feel like as humans, we are perfectly catered to help each other, because we help each other learn in just the right ways. Okay, the third is that I have been able to notice when I think somebody is folding too fast. If somebody goes from, I think X to, oh yeah, no, you're right, in one exchange, and nothing new was actually said. There was not any more information that had been disclosed. I had not tried to be more convincing. They had just decided it's not worth this conversation, and then they decided to fawn. And so I've been able to try to name it gently. Wait, what were you actually thinking? Please tell me more. Tell me more has been a huge phrase that I have learned more and more. And I really do want to give people a real invitation to come back to their own opinion and authentically mean it. And then number 4, I think I said 3, but I actually have 4. Number 4 is watch your countermoves. What do I mean with a countermove? This is when somebody finally does hold their ground with me. I pay attention to my first reaction. And if it's to push back even harder, go quiet in another way, or make them feel like they've done something wrong by disagreeing, that's the countermove. That is my nervous system trying to restore the old dynamic. No, remember, I'm always right. No, remember, this is what we're doing. No, remember, I'm the confident one and you're the one who folds. That is when your nervous system is trying to restore the old dance, the old dynamic, because this new one feels unfamiliar and uncomfortable. So this is where you get to sit and notice that impulse and choose not to act on it. Choose to be uncomfortable. Choose to live with that uncomfortability without solving it immediately. And that, my friends, is the work. In each of these situations is to widen that space between the stimulus and the response. And when it doesn't go well, you still act with authenticity. And what I found is when I have been doing this work on myself, It has really helped me shift when I start genuinely getting curious with other people's perspectives, not fake performing and creating curiosity, but actually being open to the possibility that their way of seeing it might be just as valid as yours. Shocker, right? It is just as valid as mine. And what I've come to understand, but what I didn't always believe is, again, in most situations of life, there is no objectively right answer. There is just different ways of approaching things, different preferences, different styles, different values that lead different choices. And the decision of, back to my congregation, which songs to sing with the kids on Sunday, or where, if somebody asks you, where do you want to eat dinner? And you have a preference, or, how to handle a situation at work, how to handle a patient, how to take care of a student, all of these things. There's rarely a single correct answer with a huge consequence that cannot be changed. And when I started to really internalize that, the urgency of being right started to loosen its grip, and I could breathe, I could ask, and I could actually realize this is not a big deal. And other people's ways are totally worth hearing and taking into account. So that shift from the ego-driven certainty to genuine curiosity, I promise you, did not happen overnight. It came from lots of work. It came from learning at the coach firm, learning about how to shift my paradigm. It took going and paying thousands and thousands of dollars of learning about the nervous system, and from doing this personal work of understanding where my need to be right and decisive actually came from. And so slowly, I am changing those patterns, and it's been beautiful to operate from more intentionality and less from ego, more from self-trust and less from self-protection and patterns that started way back when I was little. And this work is ongoing, and I'm not going to pretend that I have it fully figured out, but I can tell you it has changed, and it has deepened my relationships in ways that I never expected. And I know that you can have that same experience. Now, I wanted to just talk briefly about what these patterns cost you over time that I've thought about, and why there are good reasons to change. And the first is it costs you energy. When you are performing safety, performing calm, your nervous system is running a threat response underneath, and it physiologically is expensive because your body's doing two things at once. And neither of them is rest. Neither of them is in the connecting, truly ventral vagal state. And we get exhausted and burned out from either chronic fawning or from chronic fighting, because it does take a lot of work and sustained effort to maintain the presentation that doesn't match what's happening inside. And I really do believe that this is one of the most unrecognized drivers of burnout that I see. And the second is it really does cost your identity, because you are consistently giving your own wants, needs, perspectives to what other people want, or you're disregarding them. And this occurs across the years, across relationships, until you genuinely lose track of who you are, or you genuinely lose track of who other people are and who they can be. I see this so much, and I ask my clients so many times, what do you want? And they often can't answer because they have lost themselves. They don't know anymore. They have outsourced their preferences so many times for so long that they don't trust themselves, or they just have one way and everything needs to fit that pattern. And the cost that I have noticed most is the cost of your real relationships. And I think this is really the painful irony, especially with fawning is designed to protect you in a relationships. But what it does is you lose yourself. And the people in your life only ever encounter the accommodating version of you, the one who agrees, never pushes back, never brings a need to the table or an opinion to the table. And people can't actually get to know you. You're safe, but you're alone in the room. I had a client who always said, I just want to keep my wife happy. And I had to tell him, that's not being authentic in your relationship. That is a performance. And when he finally started developing more self-trust, decided that he wanted to be more authentically himself, he started sharing his real opinions, his actual needs, his honest feelings, and their relationship, just like mine has, it got better in ways that neither of them expected. And every time I see this client now, he just tells me how much that it has changed his life and his relationship for the better. And I love hearing that. And the last is, it really does wreak havoc on your body. I have done a lot of reading on what the effect of chronic stress does to your physical body. There's so many books. There's Why Don't Zebras Get Ulcers? There's When the Body Says No. There's The Body Keeps Score. And it talks about how much of this stress and this self-suppression, these long-term patterns of overriding our own truth to manage the environment, being driven by ego, being driven by fear in both ways, has measurable physical consequences. And what doesn't get expressed actually does get stored. And the nervous system does keep score. And eventually, your body finds a way to express what you could not. And it develops problems, physical problems. So if you've been fawning or fighting for a long time and you're exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't touch, maybe that is why you're burned out. Okay, so this has been long enough. I feel like this has been a very vulnerable podcast for me. So thank you for listening. This is where I want to just end. If today's episode landed on either side of this dynamic, so if you're the fawner, I want you to remember that what you have been doing is, again, it's not a weakness. It is a nervous system pattern that started for a real reason in a real situation where it genuinely did help you survive. And the fact that it's costing you now doesn't mean that you were wrong to learn it. We have compassion with ourselves, and through this knowledge, learn why we do it, and then we can outgrow it. And we realize that this survival pattern can be changed slowly through experience and repetition, teaching our nervous system that it is safe enough to do something different, that your relationships will survive and maybe even thrive when you let that go. I absolutely know that that is possible. And if you're the fighter, I also see you. I know often that our confidence and our decisiveness that other people see in you came from someplace real. It also served a purpose. And if it's ego driven, and if you are moving through your relationships with people who never push back, who always defer, who seem to agree with everything you say, it is worth asking whether you are getting the real version of those people or a performance. Because again, we deserve real relationships. Everyone deserves to be themselves and seen for who they are. And I believe that we can help people feel that they can be that way when we are more regulated. I have experienced and hope to experience even more growth by remembering this, by practicing it, moving ego-driven reactions to more intentional responses, from needing to be right to being genuinely curious, from deciding fast to actually asking, okay, so let's take a pause and see what decision I actually make. And I have learned to understand myself better, develop more self-trust. And I really do believe that we can change our patterns and we can make our decisions with more intention and authenticity. And I believe that work is available to all of us, no matter what side of the dynamic you're on. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being with me here today. I would love to help you sift some things out. If this podcast resonated with you, please share it and rate and review. I would love to talk to you if you notice yourself on either side of this dynamic. I would love to do a burnout recovery call with you. This is not a sales pitch. This is just real talk, trying to help you identify your patterns and to see if working together would help. So I will talk to you next time. Every week, you're learning something new here on this podcast, and that is a powerful first step. But guess what? Information alone doesn't create transformation. True change happens when you start to think differently and shift the nervous system patterns that drive your behavior. As a coach and an emotional resiliency expert, that is the work I do. I love to walk alongside you, whether it's one-on-one, in a small group that you choose, or with your workplace team, I can help you retrain your brain and nervous system so that stress no longer runs the show. You'll find ways to connect with me in the show notes. Let's do this work together.